motion graphic animation in After Effects. So if you can see what's going on the screen here, we're going to go through just some of the basic movements of how to do keyframing, how to change colors, and some of just the tips and tricks that you can use to create just a nice simple motion graphic. So first thing we want to do is go open up After Effects and go create a new project. When you get in, you're going to see something that looks like this. And the first thing we want to do is create a new composition. What a new composition essentially is a movie or a scene that would be in a movie, right? So you might have 12 different compositions, and each one is going to be a scene in your main movie. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to create one that's just called our main composition. I'm going to leave all the settings the same. The one thing I would suggest maybe playing around with is your background color. Instead of it being black, you could choose something that has a little bit more pop. So I'm just going to go select something more colorful, and I'm going to hit OK. You can always go back to edit that too. If you right click and go to comp settings, you can change background colors, you can add in solids, etc. So first thing we want to do now is we want to go and create a shape. So I'm going to go up to the top, and I'm going to click on my my shapes here. So you can see I have rectangle, rounded. I'm going to go to my ellipse. The hotkey for the shapes is Q. I don't generally use that, but what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go out here. I'm going to drag out a shape. Okay, and now you can see it's getting kind of stretched out. So if I hold down Shift, it'll keep it in proportion. One of the things I want to do first is you can see I have this little crosshair in the middle, and that is called an anchor point. And I want that anchor to be centered. So I'm going to go up to Layer, Transform, and Center Anchor Point Layer Content. The reason I do that is because when it rotates, it's going to rotate around that center point versus it rotating around a point that's somewhere else on the document. Another thing we can use here is if we can go over to the right side, we have this Align tab, and I can center this thing in my whole document by using some of these settings here. We can pull it over if we wanted to, but I'm going to keep it centered. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and create, we're going to change the color of this. So you can see I have my stroke. Now if I hold on Option and I click on stroke, it's going to toggle through its options. I'm actually going to turn off the stroke. And then I'm going to go over to my fill, and I'm going to change this color, something more intense so it stands out. For today, I'll go with really bright pink. I'm going to hit OK. Now my arrow tool up in the top here, I can use to re-stretch this out. I can make this bigger. Holding down Shift again, I can play around with that if I wanted to. I'm also going to go down to my layers here, and you can see I'm going to close down this caret, but I'm going to go ahead and click Shape Layer 1, hit Return, and I'm going to title this Circle 1, just so I kind of know what this is. So from here, we're going to have this thing move in, right? So if I go and I twirl down my caret here, and I go into Contents, not Contents, Transform, you can see I have a couple different options: Anchor Point, Position, Scale, Rotation, Opacity. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to keyframe or change the position over time. So I'm going to go click on the circle, and I'm actually just going to hit P for position. And what that does is it just opens up position. If I hit it again, it's going to close it down. So first thing I want to do is turn on my stopwatch, and that's going to record any changes. So right now I'm saying, okay, this thing I want it to be, we're going to have it start off screen. So I'm going to have this thing start over to the left. Now you can drag it, would be one way just with your arrow, or you can use the sliders here. So you can see that one will move vertical. This one will move horizontal. So I'm going to slide this over. You could also type in a number if you wanted to. All right, and I'm saying at the beginning of this movie, that circle is going to be off screen. You can see down here, I can see 5 seconds, 10 seconds. I'm going to zoom in a little bit using this bottom slider. And I want this thing to move in fairly quickly. So a second, maybe a second and a half at most. So I'm going to move my playhead over. Now you can see this little blue marker. That is my keyframe. And that is saying at that position, the circle needs to be off screen. So what I'm gonna do, I move my playhead forward, and I'm gonna say, all right, now I want you to be back on screen. So I can either use the slider to do this, or I could go and manually do it, or I could even go to my Align and recenter everything. So it slides on, and it's directly in the center. Okay, now I'm gonna do a little trick here in a second, but let's go ahead and take a look at this. So I'm gonna pull my playhead back, hit spacebar to play it. Okay, and it's moving okay. I think I want it to be a little bit faster. So I'm gonna take that second keyframe and move it in. So let's see, now it's a little bit under a second. So that's gonna move in pretty quick. All right, now the other little trick that I wanna do here is I'm gonna have this thing slide in, but I'm gonna have it extend past on this particular keyframe. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna move that keyframe forward. Let's see, that's where I want it to end, but right before that, I want it to have gone further. So I'm just going to pull it over in this case. And then what's going to happen is it's going to have the illusion that it's going to snap back. So let's go ahead and hit play on this. You can see it kind of just snaps back there. So nice little added animation. Okay. And next thing I'm going to do now is we're going to make this thing have a little bit more like a realistic look. So instead of that constant speed, we want it to slow in, slow out. Now, one thing I'm noticing is like my point over here is a little bit higher. So if I wanted that to be dead horizontal, I'm going to go ahead and hit this button just to center it a little bit lower. Just some little thing you can use that align for as well. So I'm going over. This thing looks good. Okay, what I'm going to do is I can click on individual keyframes and select them, and I can hold down Shift and select all of them, or I can drag. If I'm in the gray area down here, I just click off, that kind of deselects, and I can drag over all those keyframes, and now I have all those selected. And so what we're gonna do is we're gonna create this slow in, slow out look, and I'm gonna right click on one of those keyframes. I'm gonna go to keyframe assistant, and I'm just gonna do an easy ease. And so the difference here is you're gonna see a little bit more, getting a little glitchy there, okay? Have a little bit more animated motion to it, right? It just has a little bit more pop. Okay, and so now there, it's gonna stop, okay? So looking good. And now what I'm gonna do is this thing is going to slide in, but then I'm gonna have it get bigger. So I'm gonna hit S now on my keyboard, and that's gonna open up my scale. And so for right there, I'm gonna say, all right, I want it to stay at that size for a second. So I'm just gonna move this forward a little bit. I'm sorry, I'm gonna leave it there. I'm gonna turn on my stopwatch, and then I'm gonna move this thing forward a little bit. So what I'm saying is at that point and before, it's gonna be that size. And now I'm moving this forward a little bit, and I'm gonna go ahead and create a keyframe, a manual keyframe by clicking this little diamond over on the left side here. So I'm gonna click there, and now between there and there, I might have this thing change or just stay the same. So at this point, I'm gonna say, all right, between here and here, do nothing, right? So let's see, plays, stays still. Now between this point and the next one, I'm gonna have it get larger. So I'm gonna move it ahead a little bit, and I'm gonna scale this thing up. So it's gonna take over the entire screen, and it's gonna end up acting as our background. So I'm gonna have, again, slide in, and then it gets bigger. Now, I might wanna put an easy ease on that to make that look a little bit more realistic. Right. Do the same thing here, easy ease. And then I might even move these a little bit closer. So it's all about, like, you know, timing. So boom, it freezes, and then it gets bigger, okay? Now, a couple cool things you can do here. We can duplicate this and use this over and over again. So if I just hit Command D, I have the exact same thing going on, right? And I'm gonna click on this circle too, and I'm gonna hit U. And so what happens is you can see it pulled up all my keyframes. Okay, now the reason I'm doing is that it's so I can reuse this and maybe just do a really subtle color change. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna pull this forward. I'm gonna say, all right, this one's not gonna start till maybe here. And I'm gonna change the color on this one. So I'm on my top circle, click, let's go. I'm gonna select maybe that teal that I had originally. Let's see what this looks like. So now, pink one slides in, gets bigger. Next one slides in, gets bigger. And so I just did a really simple, like, kind of double animation there, right? And that is position. So we've, and scale. So we've done position and scale. We've slid something in, and then we've also had something get larger. For the next thing, what we're gonna do is we're gonna have something fade in and then rotate. So for this one, I wanna deselect, all right? So I wanna click in this gray space. So I'm gonna go up now, and I'm gonna get a rectangle. And the reason I deselect is I don't wanna draw, if I draw a shape, sometimes it'll create it on the same layer, and that's a mask. So we wanna make sure we're drawing a new shape on its own layer. So everything's deselected. I got my square. I'm gonna go ahead and drag this out, okay? And now it's blending in, but that's okay. I'm gonna go ahead and center it. You can see the outline there from the bounding box, and I'm gonna go ahead and change the color. So this time I'll go with something like a weird kind of green. Okay, hit OK, and I'm gonna go to layer, transform, center anchor point, layer content. This one's really super important because that anchor point we want in dead center so it rotates. Okay, now you can see that this shape is playing the entire time, right? So it starts at 0, even though we may not want this thing to appear until later. So what I'm actually gonna do, I could grab this and slide this over, but the easier way is just make sure you're clicked on your layer. Like, okay, I want this to appear starting here. I'm gonna hit the left bracket, and that's gonna bring this to my endpoint. Okay, now you have that option, and then you also have this work area. So this little blue slider can move your work area. Right now it's the entire thing. If I was like, okay, my animation is gonna stop at 10 seconds, I could hit N, and that moves my work area to there. So it won't play beyond that, it'll just loop. So if I just wanted to focus in on like this small work, I could hit N there, and it changes it, right? N is the end. And then if I put my plate here, I'm like, okay, this is where it begins. I hit B, it'll slide my work area in, or I can move it out. So work area is just like what you're actually gonna be watching. I'm gonna move this to like 10, 12 seconds just to have a little bit more workspace. Okay, so Now we're going forward, that gets bigger, and now the square is just going to appear right now, but what we're going to do is we're going to keyframe opacity. So opacity's hotkey is, and I'm just going to go ahead and title this shape as square 1. And I'm going to say T for transparency. That opens up my opacity. Okay, now you can see my other layers here. I just shift selected those two. If I wanted to close down all those keyframes, so I did to conserve space, I hit U and it closes all those down. Or I hit it again, anything that has keyframes on it opens it back up. So I'm saying, okay, it's going to actually be at 0. So I'm going to say, okay, create opacity, turn it on, stopwatch. I'm going to turn this opacity down to 0. And between, so it's going to do this, and then it's going to start fading in there until about here. So now I'm going to increase that opacity, right? So let's go ahead and see what that looks like. So slide, gets bigger, stops, and then we have that fade in, right? Now, what do I want this thing to do next? I want this thing to rotate. Okay, so it's faded in, and it's obviously 100% visible now. Now we're going to go to R for rotation. Okay, and so for R for rotation, what we're going to do is I'm going to turn on that stopwatch. Okay, and I'm going to say, okay, at here, be at this position. Okay, but then by the time you get here, I want it to, I'm going to go to the 0.0 degrees, and I'm going to say, all right, I want you to rotate it to here, right? Now, I think the correct marking to have it perfect would be 225, maybe. Let's see what that looks right. Yeah, that looks right. So I'm just typing in 225 there. And so let's play this, and rotates and it stops, right? So pretty nice, like simple. Okay, one thing I haven't done yet is I haven't done an easy ease. I also didn't do my easy ease on my opacity. So I'm gonna click and I'm gonna hit U, close it down, open it back up. Now you're seeing everything that has keyframes. I'm not sure why that other part opened up there, but I'm gonna right click, keyframe assistant, easy ease. All right, so I'm gonna go here again, hit U, and boom, there we go. Now you can see all my keyframes opening up, closing down, right? So now this thing fades in and rotates, okay? Now we're gonna do something where we have this just disappear, or I'm sorry, we're gonna have replicate this rather. So I'm going to duplicate this one. Now this only really works if you haven't changed position already, which we haven't. So it just faded in. If you had position, you would have to do a pre-comp. We'll talk about that in a little bit. So I'm gonna duplicate it twice, and then I'm gonna go to the P for position. I'm not gonna turn on the keyframe, okay? And I'm also going to hit scale, and I'm just gonna scale this one down a little bit, okay? And I'll hit P for position again and just slide it over. So you can always go and open up that contents, but it's much easier in my opinion just to, let's see, what was the scale that I used on this one? So I'm just gonna copy it, 31, okay. So I'm gonna go to this one, I'm gonna hit S for scale, I'll type in 31, okay, perfect. And then I'm gonna go to position, and I'm just gonna kind of, should I eyeball it? Should I not? Let's see. Go to this position, see what that 174 and 360. So this would be, I think, negative 174. Maybe not. Maybe 1124. Let's see what that looks like. Okay, I think that's pretty close. Oops. I was just doing some addition there, so it looks pretty good. All right, so let's see what happens. Okay, these are gonna pop in, and then those appear, and then they rotate. Now, one thing I could also do is have these kind of pause for a second before they come up. So what if those two, I shift select them, and I'm like, all right, this starting point's a little bit later, right? Good, boom, boom. Pretty good, right? Okay, now I'm gonna have one other animation cycle. Let's say, okay, I want to have some stuff move in here. I'm gonna do kind of some more duplication stuff. We've really gone through all of like the different positionings, so that's good. So there's a couple other tricks and stuff that we can use, but the next thing I want to show you is just how you can use pre-comps. So I'm gonna deselect everything, okay? I might even just go ahead and select everything and hit U twice, close it all down. All right, and so what I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna go, I just click in the gray, everything is deselected. I'm gonna go ahead and create a new rectangle. All right, and this one is gonna be, let's go do like a new color, go into the reds-ish. Okay, and I'm gonna have this thing be really long and skinny, so it's gonna be, I'm gonna have these stripes kind of drive in. Okay, so you can see it's on its own layer. I'm gonna say like I'll call this like strike 1. All right. And so what I'm going to do with this one is we're going to animate it, and then we're going to pre-comp it, and then we're going to pre-comp everything. So what I'm going to say is for this one, I'm going to hit P for position, turn on my stopwatch, and at the beginning, we want this thing to be over here. Okay, and at the end, now I could have done this in reverse. And we're going to move this later, so I'm going to move this, and it's just going to take over the screen. Okay, so probably should, oops, there we go. All right, and so that looks good. And now what we're going to do is we, instead of duplicating this now, we're going to pre-comp it. So pre-comp means I'm making kind of like a mini version of this that's isolated on its own. So I'm going to hit Command-Shift-C, okay? And I'm going to call this slide in line. You can call it whatever you want, but. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate this one. And the reason being is because I already changed a position. So if I keyframe position again, it's going to change. It'll like try to go sideways and at an angle. So I'm going to duplicate this pre-comp. You can see my pre-comp also came over here. And so now I'm going to go up and I'm just going to slide this one down. Actually, what I should do is go to position and just go a little bit more specific here, and just so it's perfect. Now I'm not moving. Okay, I'm going to duplicate this one. Okay, hit position, move it down. And I'm just going to keep doing this until I fill up the entire thing. And you'll see in a second kind of what we're aiming for here. So probably would have been better maybe if I did a thicker line. It would take me less time, but and I'm trying to eyeball this. Like I want these to all be as perfectly lined up as I can, so there's no gaps there, so they just, when they draw in, they don't get there overlapping. Either way, this will look pretty good. So. So what's going to happen when we're done here is you're going to see all of these are going to slide in at the same time. And what we're going to do is we're just going to offset them, and then we're actually going to pre-comp that whole group so that we can reuse that thing whenever we want. Okay. So seeing these all play, they all slide at the same time. It looks like one big square. What we're going to do is we're going to offset these ever so slightly. So for instance, this one will say you're going to start there. This one you're going to start here. This one you're going to start here, right? So we have these all moving in, and kind of like a stair set, right? So it's gradually getting larger. And so this might be too slow, but we'll see what it looks like. All right, so let's go ahead and play. So boom, boom, boom. Actually, it looks pretty good. I'm kind of liking that right now. Okay, that looks great. Okay, now one thing I was just thinking is I probably want to have this thing easy ease. So I'm gonna go actually into this one, and I'm gonna open this up because I have some keyframes on there, right? And I'm gonna easy ease this one, but because it's pre-comp, it's gonna affect all of them. So right click, keyframe assistant, easy ease. Now I went into this one, right? So you can see down here, I have main composition, I have slide in line. So I'm gonna go back now, I'm just gonna close in slide in line. Now I'm back to main comp. So all of these should retain that easy ease look now, and I think they do. So looking pretty good. Now, getting even crazier, I wanna reuse this whole group. So I'm gonna shift select all of these slide in lines, and I'm gonna pre-comp them all. So Command-Shift-C, pre-comp this. I'm gonna say like group of slide in, hit OK. Okay, and now, so these will be here, but maybe I don't want them to be at this part. I'm gonna have this start later in the animation. So I'm gonna go ahead and slide this whole thing over. When do I actually want this to do this? We'll say, let's see what's going on here. This thing plays, those rotate. Maybe like there is where I want them to start. So I slide this whole thing over, and now let's play our whole animation. and then we could keep doing stuff, right? So now if I wanted to cycle back and reuse a circle, right? Well, what if I went and pre-comp the circle? So pre-comp circle, and then hit OK. Okay, now here's my pre-comp circle. I can bring this in and use this later on, right? So it's the same thing. Okay, maybe the color's not the best for this one. So those are gonna go past, and then that's gonna slide into right at the end of that. So I can just keep reusing some of these things, right? As long as I pre-comp them. Pre-comp stays the same, right? Now if I change one of these pre-comp animations, then you know, I have to make some changes. But in terms of exporting this, okay, right now we want to save these, so we're gonna save this. I always save to my Creative Cloud folder. So I have a folder for this one just called Shape Motion Graphics 2022. So when you're ready to export this, you want to go to File. First off, you want to make sure that your timeline is selected. As you can see, it's highlighted in blue. I'm going to go to File. I'm going to go to Export. And I'm going to go to Add to Adobe Media Encoder Queue. So this thing does take a little bit to kind of get going and bounce up, but it will work. And sometimes I just kind of wait, or I'll click around on Media Encoder Queue, and then it'll work. Okay, so our video did pop up. Okay, now I'm going to click on this first option. And this is what kind of file we want to send this out as. We always want to send this out as a format H.264. Okay, H.264, that's good. Export video, export audio if there is some. We're going to say work area. Now you can change that. It could be the whole thing, but for me, it's just my work area. It could be entire comp. Here, I just tell it where to go to. So I click there, and I'm like, okay, where do I want to export this to? Generally, I export to my desktop or maybe my Creative Cloud folder with the same project, right? So Shape Motion Graphics. Shape video demo 1. All right, hit save, and then to get this out, I have to go up. This is selected. I hit play, and now this will export. You can kind of see it playing through. So this will all be exported as a playable QuickTime video, and that is our demo.